Mom starts giggling. Okay, aloha. My name is Dave Monix. I'm one of the co-founders of the Hawaii Climate and Environmental Coalition. I want to welcome you all here this evening to this very exciting event. Please, everyone mute. Peter Greenville, you need to mute. Everyone needs to mute. And so we don't get any feedback. We formed this coalition because we are in a climate crisis and it's growing exponentially. We just the last IPCC report is pretty frightening, and basically they really were condemning government leaders for basically doing nothing, and that they really need to start getting on the stick to dramatically cut back on our fossil fuel use. Unfortunately, now we have this war in Ukraine, and Biden's calling to increase our production of fossil fuels. Perfect wrong timing. Anyway, so that's why this coalition, we need as many organizations and individuals working together on climate change as we can. You know, our climate coalition is made up mainly of environmental groups, but we need to have PTAs and school groups and gardening clubs, all focused on climate change, all working together to do something about it. Because in reality, the only thing that's ever made change in the United States has been the movement of people, community movements, and that's how we make change happen. And so that's why we get many people as possible involved. We just, Ann Wright and myself were in a meeting earlier today, another climate and military event, and Kai Kahele was there. And he really has no clue about what's going on with the military and climate. I was kind of shocked. So we really have to educate not only the public, but all our leaders. They don't really get it. And we're really way ahead of them in the curve. So I really want to thank you all for coming. And I turn this over to my effervescent co-host, Melody Aduhar.
Oh, mahalo, David. All right, my name is Melody Aduhar, and I'm the co-chair of the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. And we are here at the Hawaii Climate and Environmental Coalition, and that we are presenting the U.S. military versus the climate and our environment. We're featuring Ann Wright, Janet Weil, and Pete Doktor of Veterans for Peace. Veterans for Peace is a global organization of military veterans and allies whose collective efforts are to build a culture of peace by using their experiences and lifting their voices. They inform the public of the true causes of war and the enormous cost of war and an obligation to heal the wounds of war. Their network is comprised of over 140 chapters worldwide, whose work includes educating the public, advocating for dismantling of the war economy, providing services that assist veterans and victims of war, and most significantly, working to end all wars. I'm going to introduce you Ann Wright. Ann Wright is a member of Veterans for Peace and Hawaii Peace and Justice. She has written about U.S. military poisons in Asia and the Pacific, and is the co-author of Dissent, Voices of Conscience. She is a retired U.S. Army colonel and a retired U.S. State Department official who has served as the Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. embassies in Afghanistan, Sierra Leone, Micronesia, and Mongolia. And she has also served at the U.S. embassies in Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Grenada, and Nicaragua, excuse me. And after all that, she submitted her letter of resignation in opposition to the invasion of Iraq to the late Secretary of State, Colin Powell, on the day before the onset of the war. Ann, my good friend, take it away.
Melody. Thank you, Melody, and thank you, David. It's really a pleasure for us to be with you representing Veterans for Peace. Thank you for acknowledging our organization. We have, besides myself, two other members of Veterans for Peace, as you mentioned, Pete Doktor, that lives right here in Honolulu, who is co-founder of our Hawaii chapter of Veterans for Peace, and also a co-founder of the chapter of Veterans for Peace in Okinawa. He's also part of the Okinawa Alliance and a board member, as I am, of Hawaii Peace and Justice. And like all of us, we're part of all the Oahu Water Protectors and coalitions. And he's also a plaintiff in the Wai Ola Alliance. And we have with us all the way from Portland, Oregon, Janet Weil, who is a long time peace activist. I've known her even longer than I've known Pete. She was on the national staff of the great organization Code Pink Women for Peace. And then she moved from California and up to Oregon and has really become quite an active member of our Veterans for Peace chapter there and our Climate Crisis and Militarism project. She also is on the media team for Extinction Rebellion in Portland. And Janet's going to start us off with a presentation that our National Veterans for Peace organization has available for organizations. And then she'll be followed by Pete, and then I'll have a small presentation at the end of it. So Janet, we're welcoming you to Hawaii. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be in warm, beautiful, but unfortunately heavily militarized Hawaii on a cold night here in Portland. So thank you all for attending. We're here on day 14 of the Russian invasion of and war on Ukraine. This war is Exhibit A of Veterans for Peace's Climate Crisis and Militarism project. In heartbreaking scenes, we are witnessing the interlocked crises of nuclear weapons, nuclear war, fossil fuels as a weapon of war, environmental contamination of war, the sudden out migration of a population, the killing of civilians and the destruction of infrastructure and normal life, and the invisible, intangible, but very significant increase now in military-caused greenhouse gas emissions. As my colleague Jim Janko said tonight at our meeting that we had before this, the atmosphere is keeping track of those military emissions, even if we cannot yet. So I will show you some details of how the global climate crisis and militarism, especially US militarism, are interlocked and what we can do in response. So these are 4 areas that we focus on: reporting and reducing US military emissions, of course, supporting peace, which is the foundational mission of Veterans for Peace, and opposing US militarism. We stand for climate justice and oppose racism that is so much a part of war. And we are advocating for reducing and redirecting much of the funding of the US military budget. So here we have together for the first time climate activist Greta Thunberg and General and then President Eisenhower, connecting the dots between these 2 gigantic crises. As Greta has famously said, I want you to act as if the house is on fire, because it is. And Eisenhower famously said, and this was in 1953, well before his final speech warning us of the military-industrial complex, that every gun that is made, every warship, rocket, etc., is a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. This is particularly poignant as we think of all the young climate activists, and I know some here in Portland, who are very concerned that they may not have a future. So here's an example of just one vehicle in the vast array of the US military. The military of the United States is the largest institutional consumer of oil and thus emitter of carbon dioxide and other pollutants in the entire world. One of the military's jets, the B-52 Stratofortress, uses as much fuel in an hour as the average car driver uses in 7 years. And I'd like to direct your attention to the bottom of the screen where you see the National Priorities Project, which is one of the organizations that provides a lot of our information and made this slide. It's a wonderful resource for peace and environmental activists. And in the right corner, The Green Zone by Barry, not Bernie Sanders, a book that came out in 2010, but is still very relevant. So if the US military was a country, it would rank as at least number 47 among all the countries of the world. This data is somewhat old. I apologize for that. This was an estimate that came out in 2017 and did get some media coverage. So the US military figures are estimates because the military does not provide this information. Finally, we have had a preliminary report by the US Army, and I will talk about that later. This calculation of CO2 emissions for the US military excludes emissions from the electricity and food that the military consumes, land use changes from military operations, or any other source. So there are many sources of military greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, these are true for all militaries, or certainly large militaries. There's military research and development, and then the production of military materiel, surveillance, troop training, base supply support, both in the United States and throughout the world. And the US has at least 750 overseas military bases, some of which, like Ramstein, are enormous. After a war, or even after military practice operations, such as on the island of Vieques in Puerto Rico, there has to be extensive cleanup and then reconstruction. That too all creates greenhouse gas emissions. Then on the right side, we see the even more severe and violent sources of these emissions. Of course, weapons testing, most notoriously nuclear weapons testing that went on for many years in Nevada and elsewhere, weapons sales, cyber wars, low intensity conflicts, war exercises, such as the RIMPAC Navy exercises in the Pacific, which I'm sure everybody here is familiar with. And then, as we are seeing day and night after bloody day and night now in Ukraine and elsewhere, war. In September 2021, the House voted pretty overwhelmingly to increase Department of Defense or military funding to almost $778 billion. So the request from President Biden was $765 billion, which was a significant increase over the last Trump military budget request. And then on top of that, Congress added on, and there's also $10 billion to the Department of Energy funding for so-called modernizing of nuclear weapons. Other groups besides Veterans for Peace are calling for major reductions in the military budget. now with the Russian war on Ukraine and the heightening of tensions throughout Europe, this is going to be a tough fight, but we need to make it. The Poor People's Campaign has put out a moral budget calling for a reduction of $350 billion in the next year's military budget, and Veterans for Peace is in support of that. I represent Veterans for Peace Climate Crisis and Militarism Project to the War Industry Resistors Network, which is a great coalition that has come together to focus on specific huge corporations within the war industry, and especially for a week of action, Tax Day to Earth Day, April 17 to 24. Military spending can be reduced by at least $200 billion annually, which would free up $2 trillion or more over the next decade. And of course, that could be going for things that we need and that do really relate to true national security. Our electrical power grid, renewable energy, and many other things. Instead of funding endless wars over the past 20 years, we could have transformed our fossil fueled energy system with plenty of money to spare. And we could have been doing other things to deal with the climate crisis, public transit, public education, the list goes on, changes to agriculture. And again, I'd like to point out two resources. Again, the National Priorities Project, and then on the right side, the Cost of War Project. We have been working with the director of that, Professor Nita Crawford. She's a great resource for us. And that is a very deep website that I encourage you all to take a look at. So I'm not saying all this to get people depressed. We are working on this project so that we can inform you and get you engaged. And this is a shot from our website. So I'm going to stop share of my PowerPoint presentation and just quickly go to the Veterans for Peace Climate Crisis and Militarism website so that you can take a look at what we are encouraging people to do and also resources that we have to share. So just to hold on for a moment. Thank you so much. And maybe somebody, while I'm getting this queued up, maybe somebody can give me a time check on my 20 minutes.
You're doing fine.
Thanks, Anne. So here's our web pages, which are part of the overall veteransforpeace.org website. Here's our mission statement. And these are ways to take action. So I want to talk about House Resolution 767. This is a resolution requiring that the Department of Defense must report and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And it's put forth by Representative Barbara Lee in my old district, which is Oakland, Berkeley in California. Right now, there are 34 co-sponsors of this resolution. We need many more. I did check and there are no Hawaii co-sponsors of this yet. So this is a great little project to get together with people in your organization, set up a Zoom meeting with a staffer from your congressional representative, talk about the issues and encourage your rep to co-sponsor this resolution. I did this in January with young members of the Sunrise Movement in my area, and sure enough, very quickly, my representative, Suzanne Bonamici, did co-sponsor. I've already talked about cutting the military budget. If you click on this button, you'll get more information about that and ways to engage in that struggle. We always are asking when we present, please suggest this presentation to other groups. We can also tailor it somewhat depending on the issues that you're most concerned with. So you just click here and fill out a little form and we'll get you all set up and give a presentation. A lot of people prefer to take their information in as videos to listen or watch. I'll just click on this real quickly. And we've got a number of really interesting videos. This is a recording of the workshop that we did as part of the People's Summit at COP26 in Glasgow last November. And it goes into depth. It was exciting to be part of that. This is our convention workshop from last year. And here's our always active executive director of Veterans for Peace with a very brief clip on how these issues intersect. Eric Edstrom is a remarkable young man who's a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. He wrote a powerful book, a memoir of his experiences. And he went from being a US Army officer in Afghanistan to Oxford University, where he studied climate crisis, climate science. So he's really a bridge person between these issues. And there's more. And then I'll just finish up by showing you our compilation of resources. This is our newest statement on the climate crisis, the Ukraine war, and the recent IPCC report, which came out simultaneously, really, with the beginning of this terrible war. Here's a short list of great books, including, as I mentioned, by Eric Edstrom, a wonderful book by Veterans for Peace Advisory Board member Jane Fonda, and so on. And then you can go deeper on what is the climate crisis, what is militarism, and articles, interviews by VFP members, and websites. So with that, I'll conclude, and I really look forward to your questions and comments.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Janet. That really gives us tremendous overview of the resources that we have available from Veterans for Peace for any group. And if I can just echo what Janet said, that if any group would like to have a more detailed presentation, it is available. Just let the national office know, or the national working group know, and they can help you out. We really appreciate it, Janet. Thanks for all your work. Thank you. And then next we're going to have from right here on Oahu, Pete Doktor, who, as I mentioned before, is a co-founder of the Veterans for Peace chapter here in Honolulu, as well as the one in Okinawa. And he'll be speaking about some of the challenges of militarism in Okinawa. Pete, go right ahead.
Excuse me 1 second. Ange and Topher Dean, could you please mute? Everyone, please mute. Thank you.
All right, aloha mai kako. And mahalo Peter, who's offered to help with my visuals that go along with this. Only they're just pictures. You just don't want to look at me the whole time, so I wouldn't do that to you folks. Is that what you folks are looking at by any chance? This power. There we go. All right. So once again, aloha aina, mahalo David, Melody, Janet, and especially the Hawaii Climate Coalition. And I have to thank those who came before us, all this work that's been done, change makers. I've been asked to cover Okinawa, my maternal motherland. we could do a whole webinar on it, but instead we're going to just focus on environmental issues in 10 minutes. So we'll get started. And I apologize, disclaimer that I won't be talking about other issues in Okinawa. Just going to focus on the environment right now. So with that, if you could go to the next slide. The next slide, please. There you go, thanks. So the Luchu Kingdom, AKA Okinawa. Before I get started, I got to give a brief historical context, at least as a recovering history teacher, and talk about Luchu, which in the Japanese language is known as Ryukyu. I'll be using those interchangeably. Likewise, Uchina is pronounced as said Okinawa in Japanese, so I'll be using those interchangeably. Hope there's no confusion. So the Ryukyu or Ryukyu archipelago consists of 160 islands, of which 47 are inhabited. Luchu was an Aboriginal sovereign nation and people, still are, prehistoric peoples, and were unified into the kingdom under the first Shou dynasty, and was a tributary to China. That was in 1429. Ironically, it became demilitarized in that the Ryukyu kings disarmed folks. Of course, some of it was to, so there's no insurrections, but it was also a form of foreign policy. Ryukyu was surrounded by empires, big standing armies and so forth, of which would crush Ryukyu. So by disarming themselves, they used culture exchange and economic exchange as a way to build security and in the region. The first invasion of Ryukyu was in 1609 by the Satsuma clan in southern Japan. Then it would eventually be unilaterally annexed or stolen officially in 1879 by Imperial Japan. That's when the first military bases actually started to wage the Imperial Japan Wars leading up to World War II, whereas Japan and US were allies in World War I. They were mortal enemies that culminated in the Battle of Okinawa, one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific, of immense loss of life. In fact, almost 1 in 3 Okinawans lost their lives in that horrible war, trapped between the US and Japan. They were stuck with US military rule after that from 1945 to 1972, and then so-called reversion to Japan, which I may add that Okinawan activists thought that by reverting back to Japanese sovereignty that they would be able to demilitarize under their peace constitution. However, that is not the case. Till today, Okinawa, despite being less than 6%, I'm sorry, 0.6%, so less than 1% of Japan's land base, it hosts 75% of US military bases, concentrated, jammed, and an island that's smaller than Maui. Well, at least 15% of Okinawa Island. Next, be talking about just some of the contaminations. Okay, there you have a map of some of the bases in Okinawa. Since 1998, so I'm going to focus on more recent history. There have been over 450 known incidents, emphasizing known, toxic spills and dumping from the military facilities. Toxic contaminants have flowed into groundwater, rivers, farmland, natural springs, and has embedded itself in the ecosystem and the people at levels far exceeding EPA recommendations. So I'm going to do this. I'll just give a couple of side examples. For example, in Kadena Air Force Base, one of the largest US Air Force bases outside of the US continent, hazardous materials have been detected in regional wildlife and the soil of US military properties that have been returned. There have also been discoveries of numerous drums containing various wastes. The red soil erosion and contaminants from rains devastate the reef, which is in a code red status. Next slide, please. So this one, folks following Red Hill will find this one interesting. As early as 2014, the military discovered monitoring system flaws and dangerous leakages in the pipelines, some of which run beneath civilian communities, but waited 4 years before initiating repairs and had never alerted Japanese authorities about this. The dangers have only come to light thanks to a whistleblower who made public report, produced under contract for the Department of Defense by the Defense Logistics Agency. That's the one that handles fuel supply for military facilities. In 2015, in response to a FOIA request, the Pentagon released records detailing high levels of contamination in Okinawa's Camp Kinser Marine Corps base, land that was scheduled for return to civilian use. Records show high concentrations of, bear with me, chlordane, DDT, malathion, dioxin, PCBs, lead, cadmium, massive quantities of neutralized cyanide compounds, inorganic acids, alkalis, and 12.5 tons of ferric chloride that were buried or so-called flushed on the bases. U.S. has left behind arsenic, depleted uranium, nerve agents, and hexavalent chromium. In 2016, 108 barrels of dioxin-tainted herbicides were discovered buried beneath the children's soccer field complex, which you can see in the photo there. Moving on to next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about those forever chemicals we've been hearing about, PFAS in Okinawa. In 2020, Marines at Futema Air Base triggered a fire retardant system at a barbecue. Mind you, this was in April 2020 when we just started lockdown. You can see some of that mess there. Last year, due to heavy rains and other factors, tanks containing contaminated water were in jeopardy of overflowing. So the military flushed the contaminated water into public sewage, which they thought was cheaper and easier, claiming it was at low levels, despite Ginowan City testing, finding it 13 times.
Sorry, I have to go to
Prior to the
birthday party for Nate Tan.
mute there, please. Prior to the release, local officials insisted contamination be burned as usual.
Sunday, I might have to go see Gregory once.
Gonna go Monday.
Military unilaterally dumped them instead. Notify them after the fact. Can you imagine if you had someone moved in your neighborhood and did that, dumped, and then told you after the fact. Local testing near military facilities on the island revealed elevated PFAS levels in spring water, fish, farmers' fields, and in drinking water for a third of the population. That's about 450,000 people. Okinawans showed blood levels of some PFAS compounds were 53 times higher than Japanese national average. Another FOIA showed that between 2001 and 2015, the facility mistakenly released at least 23,000 liters of various firefighting foams, which are highly dangerous. Now, Okinawa has to pay millions for filters to lower the PFAS concentrations. And I remind you that just a tablespoon of that stuff can poison a city's water system. Next slide, please. We'll talk a little bit about, as if Okinawa didn't have enough bases, the current Henoko base project in Henoko, rural area by Orura Bay and approximate to the Yambaru Forest, which is a biodiversity hotspot or blue zone. The irony of this base construction that you see before you is that it was supposed to be a replacement for Futema Marine Corps Air Station. People have been complaining. It was Rumsfeld called it the most dangerous base in the world. And their proposal was to close it down eventually and replace it with a facility also on Okinawa Island now that we're talking about in Henoko. So imagine if they concluded that, yeah, these Red Hill tanks are dangerous. So our proposal is we're just gonna put them and move them to the North Shore. It's not a solution. Creates more problems. This massive land reclamation effort in Oda Bay to construct V-shaped runways, helipads, and fuel docks that would link the new installation to an existing ordnance, ammunition depot, and other military infrastructure at Camp Schwab. More than 5,300 species of coral, fish, and vertebrates, and Okinawa's last remaining population of dugong, an endangered manatee like marine mammal. Of those 5,300, 260 are endangered species. This is an area of high level endemism. That means endemic species in a single location. So it means that there's likely species we don't know about. Moving to the next slide. And Jason was talking about the dugong. This is the last northern feeding ground for the critically endangered dugong, part of Ryukyu's Mo'olelo, their mythologies, and protected by U.S. Historic Preservation Act. The dugong faced potential extinction with the construction of the Henoko Seaport. In Dugong versus Rumsfeld, Okinawa and Earth Justice lost in court battle against the U.S. Department of Defense, claiming that the construction had taken into account relevant issues and that the Japanese government had fulfilled its obligations. The truth is that Japan had submitted bogus EIS statements and had withheld information from the U.S. government. Next slide, please. Adjacent to this project were helipads, as you see here, for Osprey. They were constructed in the northern training area near the Yambaru forest I mentioned. This entailed felling 24,000 trees and endangering endemic species such as the Okinawa rail. Now, ironically, this area was registered as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and still it's disrupting natural habits, breeding grounds with these military facilities. And before I wrap up here with some examples, I should talk about nuclear threats. There are over 1,200 warheads at Kadena Air Base and Naha Air Force bases. U.S. nuclear vessel ports calls at the White Beach installation, and there has been depleted uranium found at some of their bombing ranges, just like here in Hawaii. And I'm going to start wrapping up with the last slide and just overview some of the challenges to protect Okinawa's environment. At the bottom of this issue is the dual occupation by the US and Japan, encapsulated in the SOFA, or Status of Forces Agreement. That's the treaty between US and Japan that outlines the terms and conditions of US military bases in Japan, not just Okinawa, but Japan. I should have said I'm just focusing on Japan. Of course, there's bases in, I'm focusing on Okinawa because most of the bases are there, but there are bases in Japan as well. So problem is the military polices itself. It maintains exclusive management rights. There's no comments or transparency required. There's little to no ability for on-site inspections. They maintain sovereign immunity under this treaty. The military is not required to remediate contamination on land returned for civilian usage, nor are there any mechanisms to force the US military to open up information or report to the Japanese government. As we know, PFAS is unregulated by the EPA and Japan. So from bases from Korea to Belgium, PFAS are enabled by an EPA sets a voluntary limit. However, scientists are concerned that its limit is too high. As of August 2017, the DoD had tested 2,668 wells worldwide, of which 61% of them were found to have PFAS over 70 parts per thousand. As if Okinawa didn't have enough military, Japan is also remilitarizing itself. And ironic, some bases that are returned, as promised, because people have been complaining since they've existed, Japan has been putting self-defense forces there. So in other islands. However, this talk is focused on US forces. But I'd be amiss if I didn't mention that. Now, Okinawa is being forced to be a front line in the building war between the US and China. Once again, Okinawa is being sacrificed as a combat zone. As if we didn't have enough environmental problems as it is, because Okinawa has never fully recovered from the environmental devastation from World War II, of which both my parents survived. So wrapping up here, Japan is warming up actually faster than the global average. The frequency of heavy rains is surging while precipitation actually decreasing. So that's why you see more floods and so forth. Agriculture has been severely impacted. Seaweed beds are decreasing or vanishing, and the coral reef has been decimated. I'm sorry, I don't have much good news, but I leave you with a photo of the resistance in Okinawa and allies, of which I should mention that Ann Wright and myself had been on Veterans for Peace delegations there and joined in some of the protests where we were carried away by Japanese police. As locals there routinely, weekly, daily, maintain vigils to stop these constructions. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'll take any questions, comments later or in the chat. Yeah, David.
Great, thank you, Pete. That was very, very interesting. It's always really interesting to see the photos from Okinawa. And for those of you all who haven't had a chance to go to Okinawa, it is really well worth your time to go. It's a beautiful island, but boy, it is the epitome of U.S. occupation. I'm going to finish up this with kind of wrapping up a little bit of Hawaii and a little bit of other parts of the Pacific, because there's a lot going on in all the regions of the Pacific, not just in Okinawa. One of the best resources that you can have on this is a reasonably recent book called Poisoning the Pacific by John Mitchell. John is a journalist in Japan that spent a lot of time in Okinawa. And his book, Poisoning the Pacific, has the details of what the US military has been doing since World War II. It is really a remarkable, remarkable book. And I'll just go through some of the contents of it just to give you a flavor of it. So if you are doing research on anything, particularly the nuclear warfare, both the bombs that the US dropped in Japan and then the testing of nuclear weapons in the Marshall Islands, Pete gave you a great rundown on what's going on in Okinawa. And then talking about the herbicides, Agent Orange and other things in Vietnam, and barrels that are still found in Okinawa, sometimes even here in Hawaii. The pollutions that we have of a variety of locations. If you go down to number 8 on Guam, the Marianas and Johnson Atoll. Guam and Palau and the Federated States of Micronesia now are the really the hot spots for increased US militarization with part of the Marine Force that was forced out of Okinawa because of citizen activism, because they were so furious with the continued sexual assault and rapes of Okinawan women, that finally the US military said, okay, we are going to move part of the Marine population out. Unfortunately, they moved it on down to Guam. So the people in Guam are having to accommodate an increase of almost 10% of the population of Guam has been increased by this Marine and family dependent families that are moving in there without any increase in the infrastructure for the tiny little island of Guam. You think about the naval armadas that are plying the waters as freedom of navigation, military war maneuvers, they call them, war military exercises. Well, they're not, they're war maneuvers. And the South China Sea, the East China Sea is filled with US naval aircraft carrier groups, which is not just an aircraft carrier, that's 10 associated ships and submarines that are with each one of the 2 carriers that are out there. And the Brits have sent in their aircraft carrier, and the French and the Australians, everybody's out there. So the potential is really dangerous for an incident, an accident out in the Western Pacific right now. So this book, Poisoning of the Pacific, is really, really good, except for us here in Hawaii. It didn't mention Hawaii except for like one paragraph. And when I know John Mitchell, and I called him as soon as I got a copy of this book and said, John, what happened? We're sitting here in Hawaii and this place is polluted like can be. And he said, that's a separate book. I didn't have time to write just on that. So not that this is a book, but it is an attempt at kind of helping out. This is an article, oops, let me go back there, that Kyle Kajihiro, whom you all know here in Oahu, and Jim Albertini over on Big Island, and myself, I took the research that those 2 guys have done over the years and kind of put it together and came up with a very long article, although it's a brief history of US military poisoning in Hawaii. And I've put a link to that article in the chat so you can read it. But, you know, just looking at what we have here in the Hawaiian Islands, where on Oahu, we have 4 major military bases where we have the pollution that we'll talk about in just a minute that you all are very, very familiar with of the Red Hill water contamination, jet fuel. But if you think back to World War II and all the things that happened after World War II, all of the munitions that the military had left over, well, guess where they went? Well, there's a big pile of them about 10 miles off Pearl Harbor, straight south of Pearl Harbor, and 500 feet of water is a massive, massive munitions dump. And if you go to the west coast of Oahu, in like 100 feet of water is a whole reef that is made of unexploded ordnance. And the decision has been, we are not going to mess with it because it's been in there so long that now it's a habitat for the fish and for the this and for the that. Well, anybody that lives and fishes over on the west side of Oahu has to be very, very careful. And when you talk to the folks that live out there, they know about this. I mean, they are careful of it, but the dangers that we have there are substantial and left over from 70 years ago now. And then all of the training areas that we have here on Oahu. We have Makua Valley that you can only go into like 10% of it, and then you have to. And the Makua Valley access is a cultural access once a month, but accompanied by military unexploded ordnance personnel, because the majority of that valley still has not been cleaned up. And you think over to the island of Ko'olavi, where back in the 70s and 80s, the great citizen activism, which forced the Bush administration to finally, Bush 1, to finally declare that there would be no more bombing on Ko'olavi. That island still has not been cleaned up. There's over 2/3 of it that's not been cleaned. And even the 1/3 supposedly that is clean, they say you don't dig deeper than about 3 feet, because we didn't go deeper than 3 feet. If you go over to the big island, of course, the giant Po'akaloa training area, where aircraft fly in from the continental United States just to drop bombs and then fly all the way back without even landing here in Hawaii. They just fly over, drop their bombs. And it's just not the US that's using that. Other nations use that, Po'akaloa. Another big battle is brewing, of course, that you all know about, which is the land back campaign, where we have something like 27,000 acres that are going to be, the lease on them is coming due in 2026 or 2029. And those acres were leased to the US government for $1 back in 1965. So, there's a lot of citizen activism that says, we want those lands back. And I think we'll get them back. There seems to be now with the Red Hill crisis, and finally our congressional delegation, all 4 of them, although some of them being pulled by their teeth to finally start challenging the US military. I think we have a good opportunity to finally call the hand of our own congressional delegation, saying, you have to support the people of Hawaii and not at the expense of the US military. So I think we have a real good chance of having those leases canceled and those lands returned back to Hawaii. If you look over, we barely have Kauai on that that picture, but the most important part of that is the Pacific Missile Test Range, which has a heck of a lot more stuff going on there than we really know about. I mean, it has Aegis missiles that fire to try to intercept missiles that are being shot from Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, across the missile test range. The end of it being in the Marshall Islands, the Marshall Islands that suffered so much from the nuclear testing that the US did there. The on Kauai, they are testing the missiles to try to intercept in mid-flight or mid-arc the missiles that are coming out of Vandenberg. This is a very interesting international political thing, because sometimes the missile tests have to be postponed because guess what? There are intelligence ships just offshore, 50 miles offshore Kauai, Russian intelligence ships or Chinese ships that are in international waters but are watching what is going on. And back in the fall, the US military had to postpone for days and days and days because they didn't want the Russians to see what was happening. Well, finally, I guess the window of opportunity had closed, and it was like now or never, we gotta send it. And guess what? The missiles missed. So it's a very interesting place, and that is going to be that is a location that's under consideration for this massive homeland defense radar, which we on Oahu, we think we were successful in saying it should not be out at Kaena Point. But unfortunately, now it looks like our congressional delegation, primarily Mazie Hirono, has said it really needs to go over on Big Eye or on Kauai, even though the military itself says that radar is really not what we need. The threats that we need to be identifying cannot be identified with that radar, which is a $1.7 billion radar, which would be the highest structure on the island of Kauai. And they would have to completely redo the road network to get all of the heavy equipment through on the road structure and across the bridges, which currently could not hold all the heavy equipment that's been taking over there. So, you know, we have a lot of different things that are happening here. And of course, the big one right now is the shutdown Red Hill. That I know all of you all have been very, very active in challenging the military, the Navy, and pushing to get Red Hills closed down. And that finally, on Monday, here we have the Star Advertiser, permanent closure ordered. Well, that is good. It's supposed to be within a year that they're supposed to drain the tanks and close Red Hill. However, I think most of us are very wary of this, that the military has not been too honest with us all the way along, and there can be a lot of complications that would be coming up, to include, oh, well, the China threat. We've got to have the petroleum right here. We've got RIMPAC that's coming up, the Rim of the Pacific military exercises that one would hope would use up some of this 1 million gallons of fuel that they still have left in the 14 tanks that are in operation. 14 out of 20 of them are in operation right now, according to Representative Kai Kahale this morning in the webinar that we listened to. So, you know, with Red Hill as kind of the rallying point for a lot of environmental issues that we have here in the Hawaiian Islands that deal with the military, I hope that we as a collective and a coalition can really put a lot of pressure on our state level government, on our congressional delegation, and really back off the military on so many of its issues that are really more, in my opinion, more threats to our national security than are actually helping our national security. And one must consider that the health and welfare of the people that live here in the islands is a part of national security and human security. So with that, I will stop and thank you all very, very much for allowing the three of us to make these presentations, and we'd be glad to answer any questions. And I'll also post in here a recent article that just came out yesterday that I wrote about people in Hawaii being very wary of the Department of Defense decision to sudden decision to close down Red Hill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne and Pete and Janet. Incredible presentations. So please, folks, raise your hands if you'd like to ask a question. I just want to make a quick comment, and maybe it's a question, I'm not sure, but we all don't know. The U.S., most of our taxes, almost 50%, are going to the military here in the United States. The military is the biggest fossil fuel user in the world, and is also, as an organization, and also the biggest polluter in the world. And it's interesting. It's ironic that the U.S. military has 800 bases around the world, and they're using these bases to protect all the oil. And so they're actually using the oil that they're protecting. It's absurd. But there are 800 military bases around the world, and we're not at war. We spend more on the military than the next 10 countries combined, and 8 of them are our allies. We could easily cut our military budget 3/4, and we'd still be spending more than all the other countries combined. The military budget is a huge elephant in the room. Everyone's like telling the military, thank you for your service, but they are the biggest polluters, and they are the biggest aggressors and thugs in the world. And somehow we have to balance that out and figure out a way to address that. But I think this is the first step for people to start at least thinking about this, because we do all have to get involved. It's really hard to get through to our congressional delegation that they've got to cut the military budget. It's beyond their comprehension. Why would you even say that? And we have to start plugging away at this, because if we don't cut the military budget, climate catastrophe is inevitable. So with that, Matt Geyer has a question. Please go ahead, Matt.
Thank you so much, Ann, Pete, for putting this presentation together. It's really fantastic. Given the success we've had with Red Hill, I mean, what do you think? What do you think was the main reason we were able to get some movement there, and how can we replicate that for other issues?
Well, if I could mention, well, I think it was citizen activism that had a heck of a lot to do with it. And it was also a lot of military spouses who talked to the Navy, Secretary of the Navy, and all the admirals and all the generals in terms and in tones that they had never heard before, other than when they were little kids. I mean, when the military spouses got angry and went after them, I think that really had a huge impact. And the fact that the media covered all of this, I mean, we've got to be proud of our local media, the television stations, the Star Advertiser, Civil Beat, all of them have really been strong and writing very, very strong editorials. So there was really no one that was defending the military on any of this when we finally got our congressional delegation totally to say, close them down.
Great, thank you. Peter, you have a Greenville, you have a question?
Yes, and this is in reaction to what Ann says. She's absolutely right, I think, about why that effort was successful. But the reason it was successful actually worries me, because the whole time, I was wondering, if it weren't for the fact that military families were affected, would they have done anything at all? Because it is in their treatment of non-military people that they are at their most callous and their most dishonest and their most corrupt. So if we did have a situation where military families were not affected, how would you rate the chances of success?
Well, if I'll just answer quickly, and then somebody else can jump in too. You're exactly right. I mean, it was very lucky, and I use that. I hate that anybody had to suffer this, but it was, thank God, it was the military families themselves, because they were the ones that were able to really get to them. When you look at the civilian families that have also been affected, that lived on these in these neighborhoods that are the former military residential areas, but they're living in the private things, they're not getting anything. They're not getting any help at all. And that would have been exactly what would have happened to all of us as civilians here on Oahu. And we would have been hoping and praying that somebody at the state level would help out, help with water, help with this and that. But fortunately, if this had to happen, that the military families were the ones that had to suffer it, because they were the ones that were able to get to the senior leadership of the Department of Defense. Thank you.
Yeah, hold on, Pete. I'm an old activist. I've been organizing since civil rights. I marched in civil rights, but I can tell you that it is massive support. It is always movements. So we don't need to get half the people in the country, or even most of the people in the country. I think it's like 10%. Once you get 10% of any group to start getting involved and concerned, you can make change happen. So it's just a matter of, it was brilliant because all these different organizations and groups were all working together. We went and got our different councils to pass resolutions, and everyone was calling everybody and sign holding, all of that worked together. So you don't always have to have the military involved, but it just takes a movement of people getting involved. Pete, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on some of the last two questions. Let's be honest, we're speculating a little bit. The question was like, lessons from this small win. I don't disagree with what Anne was saying. However, what I would add is that I believe that it was also just part of the military revamping for the 21st century, as they've outlined before. Anyone else remember the Army land reduction meetings we had? There's been a lot of demands to cut some of the pork off the military and also reconfigure for 21st century wars, whatever that means, let's try, so I think the Red Hill tanks were just convenient. They'd been there for almost 80 years, but activists kind of wrecked that, by calling so much attention to it. As to whether the question of if it wasn't military personnel, I don't really have a strong feeling I know the answer to that, because of what the US military does to their own people anyway. And so if you know the case of Fort Lejeune in North Carolina, you would know that clearly the military does not prioritize the lives of military or their military families. They don't do that over their mission, And the last example I'll give, because when I talk about Okinawa, I only talked about ecological issues. I didn't talk about all the other problems. But related, and to make an example, is because not many people know about this, there was a problem in Okinawa with military dependents, where the kids were getting molested and sexually assaulted by other military dependents. So these were like teens, kind of bullying, hazing other military dependents in Okinawa. They buried it. The local commanders, they buried this story because it was so incriminating. And it just tells me like, wow, you can't even take care of your soldiers' kids like that. You just abandon them like that. I don't really feel they value the lives of folks in the military much either. Thanks.
Service would be sufficient to ensure that there are no vector issues. If we can do daily, that'd be great. But
I think what Dale was talking about is a drop site at a transfer station where there's large volumes of food waste coming in from a lot of people within the community. Then it would have to be moved out on a daily or at least every other day basis. There are, a lot of places where they collect food waste weekly or even bi-weekly, where people keep the food waste in the residence. I compost all my food waste. I keep it in a 2-gallon bucket until the bucket is full. And it usually takes me 4 to 5 days to fill up a bucket. So
I think that was a mistake. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? We have Rico Perez in here from Eugene, Oregon, who signed in particularly to hear this presentation and wanted to hook up with Janet Weil from Oregon. And because they also want to start working on climate and environment. Are you there, Rico? Did you have any questions? You want to make any comments quickly?
No, Janet, I just wanted to connect with Janet. I'm grateful that you guys are doing this. We're starting I'm in Eugene, Oregon, and I am the chair for Community Alliance of Lane County. And we are starting a new program on April 3rd called Reimagining National Security. And it is all about what you're talking about. And I'd love to connect with you so that the rest of the group can, you've got some great information that I would love to tap into, because my whole thing right now is I'm trying to tap into every local climate change group, because if they're not realizing that
what do you call that?
Please mute.
if they're not realizing that the military is the biggest polluter in the entire world, we're not going to get there. We need to have that understanding much greater to the level that what you're talking about. And so I look forward. I'm going to send you an email.
Okay, great. And Rico, if I could, thank you so much for joining. Great to have another Oregonian on the call. And if I could just please ask you to fill out the form. Gary, if you could drop the link to the slideshow presentation request form in the chat for Rico and anyone else who wants it. Fill out that form, and then I will be happy to present to your group or coalition. Rico, are you working with Extinction Rebellion in Eugene?
We know them, and a little bit, yes.
Okay.
We have other folks that are.
I just wanted to kind of circle back quickly with a couple other things, because David's summary of points was so great, and you covered some things that are in our longer slideshow, David. However, there were a couple of things that need to be updated. The official count for U.S. overseas military bases is now at 750, because of course the military bases in Afghanistan are now in the hands of the Taliban. So that's what happens when you lose a war. The other thing is, I really want to encourage all of you to think about participating in this Tax Day to Earth Day. I mean, you don't have to do it every day. You could pick a day, but War Industry Resistors Network. And you have so many things in Hawaii, unfortunately, so many targets that you could protest. And that is a great way to raise public awareness of what are our tax dollars going for, and then how much the earth and all of us on the earth need it. The US military budget is not nearly 50% of the discretionary funding. It is well over that. I think it's about 60%, because when you add in not only the military itself, but nuclear weapons, the servicing of the debt of previous wars, including, of course, Afghanistan, which just ended last August, and the care for veterans, that is well over 50% and growing. And I see that Ang has a question.
Hey, yeah. Oh my goodness, I learned so much from all of you. And I was just gonna ask if it's possible federal push from Kahele to representative works in Washington, D.C. when they pushed the White Act. Does that have anything to do with the permanent shutdown of Red Hill? Because after that happened, we saw the red we saw the response, or I don't know if it was a response, but we saw the Pentagon and the DOC publicized that they had shut down the Hill. Yeah, so I was wondering about that.
I'm not sure. Did you guys get that question? If not, and you could type it in the chat.
Yeah.
Did you understand the question? I didn't understand it. You'll have to type it into the chat. You're breaking up, Ange. I'm sorry, but we couldn't understand what you were saying.
It might help to also just say it without the video on.
Am I breaking up a little bit?
Yeah. Go ahead. Try your question again.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead. Ask your question.
Is this okay?
That's better.
Yes, go ahead. Ask your question.
Oh, okay. So I was wondering if the push from the federal level, when Kahele, Senator Schatz, when they had passed the Wai Act, if that influenced the DOD and the Pentagon to shut down Red Hill, because it was kind of like immediately after, not immediately, but like 2-3 weeks after, they had done like the announcement at the Capitol with the federal congressman that was then, and then we heard in the news the Red Hill facility got shut down. I was wondering if that was like influenced.
I'll take that. Well, I'm sure behind the scenes, the DOD was telling all the Congress people, we're going to have more money to close this thing down. We've got to have this, we've got to have that. And our Congress guys and gals went, okay, fine, we can get the money. You know, and then they just announced today they've got another 150 million, I think it is. So money really is no object, but DOD being the, you know, the ultimate federal agency, they know how the game's played, and they put, I'm sure they put a little marker down that in order for us to do anything, you've got to start funneling a lot of money to us. And once the congressmen and women came through with that, then I think that helped with the decision, probably. Thanks.
Go ahead, Pete.
Okay, and I'll chime in as well on that question, if we understood it correctly on. I think what's important to keep in mind is step back and look how many years federal reps in Hawaii enabled Red Hill, okay? You know, and so the question is, why the immediate about face is really the question. And if you look at what happened preceding that, it was all hell breaking loose, you know, polls showing 80% of residents opposed, and it's election year. So there ensues a panic and maybe in Kahele's case, a way to jockey himself to become a governor, as has been expressed. So I think it's also important to look at those factors. And then again, what put the fire under representatives that haven't done anything for so many years. I think a little credit goes to activism. Thanks.
Okay, brilliant. Are there any other questions? I think we're starting to wrap up here. No other hands raised. This is a vitally important issue. The IPCC report came out, as I said, and then the war with Ukraine happened, which completely wiped out the IPCC report that was trying to be presented. In fact, there was Ukrainian scientists who were going to make presentations about it, and they had to like run for the hills. So we really need to be talking about the IPCC report as soon as, in fact, in our future meeting, we will definitely have talk about that. Where do we go from here? We did pass a climate emergency last year. We're the first state to do it. That's great. But like Greta says, talk is blah, 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 but we need action. And we need to put a lot of pressure on all our representatives who are very slow to act. Are there any other comments any final comments from our presenters, Pete, Ann, Janet?
Well, I see the question in the chat from Rick, and the role of capitalism in all of this is, of course, huge. And I would really recommend for Rick and anyone else who wants to get more into this, a book that's on our resources or Explore Issues page, Understanding the War Industry, by Christian Sorensen, who is a veteran and has done and is continuing to do in-depth studying of the contracts, where the money's going, and then what it's for. It's a comprehensive resource book that will really fill in. But as Smedley Butler, a distinguished general in the early 20th century, said, war is a racket. And he finally stopped being a general and being part of what he called muscle for Wall Street and turned anti-war writer. So I also, again, would really encourage you to bring out these issues with the around tax day. Everybody has to, most people have to pay taxes. Very few people enjoy it. And it's a teachable moment, as we say.
Thank you, Janet. That's wonderful. Ann.
Yeah. If any of you all have veterans in your family or have friends that are veterans that you think might find Veterans for Peace a useful part of their lives, we would love to have them. And you can be in touch with Pete or me. And I see Shelley saying she's an Army vet. We are doing Zoom calls. And in fact, we have one next week, Shelley. I'll put my email in the chat. And if you'll just send me your email, I'll put you on and send you what we have. And Pete's put his in also. And we would love to have, veterans that are willing to challenge our military budget and challenge what the military is doing. Thank you so much.
Can I add to that, please? I also want to encourage not just military veterans, but also military family members. You don't have to be a veteran or in the military to be part of Veterans for Peace. We have an associate, which Jan is an excellent example, because when you're in a military family, everybody's impacted. So just want to underscore that to welcome, encourage folks. We have a meeting coming up, don't we, Ann?
Yeah, next week. Mm-hmm.
Next week. So get in touch with us, folks, so we can get you aboard that meeting. I had just a few final words. As the title of this talk outlines, this is about militarism. Doesn't necessarily say anti-military, but it focuses on militarism. And of course, the difference is huge. Militarism is the political and economic exploitation of the military and military members. And I think that's important to consider when you start talking about capitalism. I don't disagree with what was said, but I would just have to remind that, authoritarian regimes, some that call themselves socialists, some call themselves communists, have also engaged in heavy militarism. China's wrecking the South China Seas right now with islands they're creating. That's an ecological hazard right there. So with that understanding of militarism, it's not limited to any one country. I think there's plenty blame to go around, and I'll end by underscoring that it's indigenous peoples that bear the brunt of militarism. Because what's happening in Ukraine happened in Ryukyu, also known as Okinawa, and in Hawaii. I almost threw up when I heard Ed Case make a speech about Russia's violating the sovereignty of Ukraine from Hawaii soil, the nerve to say that. So just kind of pointing out those blind spots and to support Native movements because they've been, stewards and models of ecological balance. I yield. Thank you.
Good. I yield my time. That's great. And then, Ann, did you want to quickly mention any of the sign waving and stuff? I guess Friday that there's sign waving at the Capitol regarding Ukraine and Red Hill. Any other actions you wanted to mention?
Surely, and that's Matt Geyer is the one that is the foundation for that. We thank Matt very much. That's 4 to 5:30 on Friday. And then every Wednesday at the COA at the Halava Gate at the Navy, we have an opportunity to be there for a protocol as well as sign waving. And any organization can mobilize its own people to go anywhere and have a sign waving and just let us know and we'll put it out to help. It's not one person or one group organizing everything. It's all of us taking targets of opportunity all over town and all over the islands. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann, Pete, and Janet. Just a couple of closing things. We are going to have Becky Gardner on the 23rd. She is going to do a presentation on dealing with the stress and frustration of activism and climate change. When I was a kid, we had one disaster at a time. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis. We had Kent State, but now it's like climate change, Ukraine, plastic in the ocean. I mean, every day there's a new thing to worry about, and it's pretty stressful. And we all need to give each other a hug and support each other because it is very, very hard to be activist and to be aware of what's really going on. And there are ways to help not get burnt out. And basically it's an anti-burnout presentation. And then thank you all, Ann and Pete and Janet. I think this is going to close up this part of our program.
There will be
go ahead.
recording.
Oh yes, this is recorded and we will share that. And then we do have from our, we have different task forces who are working on legislation right now in the legislature. And I want to invite each one of them to come forward and share whatever legislation they would like people to know about and support.
But
Oh, go
before
ahead,
we
sure.
do that, I just really want to give everybody an opportunity to just express their aloha to these incredible speakers tonight. So much appreciation for all you do and all the words you share tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yay!
so much. Thank you, everybody. Be well.
Can
Thank
everyone
you.
put the video on and I can get a picture?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, okay, we're gonna take a picture. Everybody,
Yes.
turn on your cameras.
Yes,
Melody, are you a good picture taker?
I'm gonna try. But let me try to close the chat out first and make it a bigger screen here. Oh, how do I close the chat?
Click on the word chat.
Oh, okay, so it's participant. Oh, there we go. Okay, everyone. Okay, there's two screens, so I'm gonna have to take two pictures. Okay. All right, smile. All right, peace sign. Okay, one more. I'm gonna move the screen over. Okay, and smile and peace sign. Excellent. Okay, I want everyone to stay because we are going to be discussing environmental legislation at this time. So please, you're all invited to stay, whether you're members of the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party. And I thank Ong for recognizing me for testifying. So that is what we do, and that's what we need all of you to testify as well. And I know most of you do. So at this time, and Ann keeps.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
We need to talk to you. All three of you are wonderful. Oh,
We love you, Ann.
Yeah, and I was actually wanting to ask Pete, because that picture of the PFAS in Okinawa looked horrible. If you're telling me that 1 tablespoon is enough to poison the water system, and that looked like a cloud of PFAS. I mean, unless I wasn't sure what that picture depicted. Was that what that was? Oh my gosh.
It was 140,000 liters, which liters is, sounds bigger than gallons, but it's not. But doesn't take much. But thank you, Melody, and the Environmental Caucus. Wow.
Okay, mahalo. Mahalo for being
Thank
with
you.
us. Right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, can we start with Jeff McKnight?
Okay, I'm going to quickly share my screen here. And I want to be mindful of everybody's time, so I'm going to go through this quickly. So what I did is I put the bills that we're strongly supporting in the chat, along with my email address. And if anyone's interested in getting more information or possibly supporting these bills with testimony, then I encourage you to email me. We're having a meeting of the Food Security and Agriculture Committee next Tuesday. And of course, anybody's welcome to join us for that meeting. We actually have 20 bills that are still alive, which is miraculous at this stage of the game. I would say 8 of them are among our top priorities. 3 of them are composting bills. We've tried for so long to get composting bills passed, and we have 3 of them that are still alive. That's Senate Bill 2288. Move my screen over here. Wait a second. Senate Bill 3004, Senate Bill 2288, and Senate Bill 2955. We're strongly supporting Senate Bill 2955, but at this point, as I said, we'll take almost any composting bill because it's so important. I think it's our top priority to get one passed so that we can have places where people can start composting or get reimbursed for, where companies can get reimbursed for programming. 3004 establishes and appropriates money for a reimbursement program and also for a full-time permanent compost reimbursement program manager position. That one is still alive. We also have, which these were in order, oh, there they are. Senate Bill 2288, which is another reimbursement program. This one's with the Department of Agriculture to provide reimbursements to farmers, ranchers, and landscapers when purchasing compost from a certified processor. And then the last one is 2955, which requires the Department of Agriculture to establish a 3-year compost reimbursement pilot program to provide reimbursements to farmers and ranchers who purchase compost from a certified processor. So they're all quite similar to each other, and we'd be happy if any one of them would pass. The other thing we've been trying to get passed in the last couple of years is a food hub pilot program. Senate Bill 2218 is a food hub pilot program, so we encourage you to support that one. Senate Bill 2068 is a land management bill. Let's see if I can find that one here. I have to put these in order. Okay, there it is. This one repeals board approval requirements for transfers of public lands classified for agriculture use by DLNR to the Department of Agriculture. arguably DLNR has not been handling. I'm sorry, yeah, they haven't really been handling things very well. So we'd rather see that with the Department of Agriculture. I don't think that this bill, we're not as strong, supporting it as strongly as we are the composting and the food hub bill. The other one is SB 2990. And that one is a cover crops bill. We've been trying to get one of those passed for a while as well. This is just a pilot program, which is, it's not all encompassing, but at least it's a good start. It provides up to 75% cost reimbursement to farming operations in the state for the acquisition of cover crop seeds, green manure, or compost. So that's a real good bill. That was introduced by Senator Gabbard and Senator Ocasio, and it did cross over. So look for that one. And then we have two more bills, SB 2974, having to do or relating to pesticides. Okay, this one updates the membership of the advisory committee on pesticides to replace representatives from the sugar and pineapple industry with representatives of the coffee and diversified agriculture industries. We really don't have much in the way of sugar and pineapple anymore in Hawaii, so we'd like to see representatives of areas that we do have growing right now, coffee, especially here on the Big Island, and then diversified agriculture elsewhere. So we are supporting that bill. And then the last one is HB 1526. And that one is relating to organic waste. It requires each county to incorporate into its next integrated solid waste management plan revision a plan to all organic waste produced within the county by facilities generating more than a certain amount of organic waste per year. Unfortunately, what's happening now is most of our organic waste is just going into the landfill. So it's high time that we start doing something positive with it and start processing it and utilizing it instead of just throwing it away. There are a lot of other bills as well, but we're short on time. So if you're interested in anything to do with food security and agriculture, please reach out to me by email. Anyone have any questions?
Just quickly, do you send an email out to your environmental caucus members about the bills that are coming up so that they can prepare to testify?
I could send an email out. Usually we don't, the committees don't send anything out to the entire caucus because everything happens so quickly. And if we send an email out or a blast asking them to support a bill, it could be on just a short notice. And all too often, they don't make it out of committee, or we have such a short time period to encourage people to do that. But I do keep Melody updated, and internally, the caucus is sending out testimony supporting all of these bills in some form or other.
Great, thanks.
I'd like to come up with a way where we could streamline that whole process and keep updating the entire caucus as we go along. But things happen so quickly, and yeah, and this is of course just one committee. I think there's probably 40 bills right now. It started out being over 100, but right now there's still 40 bills, at least, maybe more, that we're still supporting. Is that correct, Melody?
Yep, we've got to narrow them down tonight.
Okay, I think John Kawamoto, did you want to make for a presentation from one of the HICA groups? Or Matt?
I think you dropped off. Oh, there he is. Go ahead, John.
I don't know why we can't hear you, John.
He's muted.
Is he? Oh.
No,
Nope.
Still can't.
Your
Can't
audio
hear
is
you, John.
disconnected.
Oh, Matt can give the update.
Oh, there you go, John. We can hear you now.
We can hear you now. Go for it.
I'm just saying that Matt can give the update.
Well, you can correct me if I miss anything. We just have one bill. I think most of you all know it here, HB 2278, carbon cashback, and it's if we can get this bill enacted, it's a huge one. We will be able to see some measurable reduction in greenhouse gases here in Hawaii. So that's huge because, as you know, our greenhouse gases keep going up and up. Its emissions keep going up and up. So it would be nice to get a handle on that. So really big one, HB 2278. Give it all the support you can get. You can contact me, keepallontheground@gmail.com, or John. We can put our emails in the chat. And it has our bill has passed through the House. It has been voted over to the Senate. So we're just waiting for referrals and committees to get it through the Senate.
And so that's what you have to.
Spent $150,000 on a study to show that to see whether or not this kind of program would work, and it does work. So we don't want to waste that money that was spent. And the Tax Review Commission also voted this as the #1 priority. So let's get this done.
Where is it in the process? What's the next thing?
We are waiting for a committee to be referred to. Yeah. So it's in the Senate now. It passed through the House. So if folks want something to do, they can go ahead and start drafting their testimony or participate with us in our weekly and bi-weekly, or would that be semi-weekly, twice weekly meetings sometimes on carbon pricing, carbon cashback, and help strategize. We've been doing LTEs. We've been building up a lot of momentum around this, and a lot of good times had.
And did anyone have something about cesspools? I know Joaquin had something about cesspools, but I don't know. Is that something that the Environmental Caucus is working on, cesspools?
Yeah, we are, but I don't have anything specific right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
And did Rob Weltman leave? I don't know if Rob had anything from the
Rob
ED guys. Rob left. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other updates or bills? Doesn't. Thanks for. Oh, yes, Angela.
Hey, I don't know if you guys have heard of the House Bill 2256. It's relating to the Department of Environmental Protection. It establishes a Department of Environmental Protection to address the logistics required for the state to implement environmental justice initiatives. So it looks like it crossed over to the Senate, and it hasn't been scheduled yet. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That sounds like a good one.
Do you want to check on the bill number, because Jeff is trying to do a search right now and we're not getting a match with that number?
Okay. I will text it into the chat. Okay. It's HB 2256.
Is it the one that has a companion bill, SB 3273?
Yep.
So the companion bill got stopped at WHAM, it looked like.
SB 3273. Yeah. Well, thank you, Angela. Well, we need to check that out. There's so bills. That one went completely past me.
I actually stumbled upon it by accident. I was testifying for the feral animal management legislation, and then it happened to be in the same committee at Finn. And then, yeah, so yeah, I'm glad I could have helped in some way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Environmental Caucus testified on that one. It sounds familiar. Okay, I do want to bring up a bill, and that's Senate Bill 2662. It just crossed over, and this is with regards to construction waste, construction debris for recycling and reuse. And the Environmental Caucus testified strongly in favor of this bill. However, it got hijacked in WHAM. And as a result, now it has a very dangerous amendment, which includes incineration. So it crossed over, and now we are looking towards fighting it to revert back to its original language, which would just basically exclude incineration. So there's some discussion on this that, because we've been talking to Henry Curtis and Christine Kubat on it. And those who know Christine, of course, she is 100% against any type of incineration. Apparently, Henry Curtis indicated that there are plans for this type of waste to energy conversion, and the end product would be aviation fuel. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. Henry is also leery about it, but he's looking at it as there is some good in it. Anyway, Alan, did you want to add anything to that? Because that's concerning to the Environmental Caucus. You're mute. You're unmute. Unmute.
Yeah,
There he goes.
I definitely lean toward Christine's view on this, because the amendment does not provide any guidance to this missile. So to mix my metaphors, the cannon is very loose. It simply says, or you can just burn it, without saying, without putting any preconditions or any tests, or saying only in these circumstances shall it be allowable to burn it. It simply says wide open. It's an option. Burn the shit out of it. And so I agree with Christine that, if you present it as an option, everything's going to get burned. I think the amendment is dangerous as is. And, if they want a burn option, they have to narrowly tailor the preconditions that would allow for a burn. And I don't see it there yet. So I definitely agree that we have to either kill it or narrow down the scope of what's allowable for burning. And so if the bill survives and actually crosses over to the House, we have to monitor it very, very carefully.
Okay.
I might add that that Senator Ocasio, who introduced the bill, is asking us now to oppose it or amend it. She's no longer supporting her own.
Can someone tell me or point to the part of the bill where it says burning?
Yeah. Let's see.
I see gaseous conversion into gaseous fuel, which could be interpreted as
that's it. That's
burning as well. Is that it? Renewable gaseous fuel?
Yes.
So basically they're saying they would that H-Power would convert it into a renewable gaseous fuel, which would then be burned. Or that's what you're saying would be their loophole.
Yeah, if you look at B right there, you're correct. It says for the purpose of this section, recycling means reuse or resale of construction or demolition waste material or conversion of construction or demolition waste material into new building materials, products, or fuel for transportation or renewable gaseous fuel. So they're redefining recycling to include quite broadly renewable gaseous fuel.
May I add for the uninitiated that section 103D is part of the state procurement code, and it would only apply to state procurements. This would not apply to private sector activities. Why it's there, I have no idea.
We do.
Yeah, Hawaii Gas recommended this amendment, just to let you know.
Yeah, this is Hawaii Gas Amendment. So already you know it's a bad idea.
But what I'm saying is I don't know why they don't put this provision in a more broadly applicable section of the code. They only narrowly put it in to construction activities that involve state procurement. It's weird.
Yeah, they're up to something. What it is, we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, plans are already, I guess, in progress regarding this facility. It's going to be in Campbell Estate, and it's supposed to take place for the closing of that. I'm not sure what it's called, the acronym, but the one that you can dispose of construction waste, that is going to close, because absent that landfill, there will be no other location for construction waste in the island. Probably a state, I'm not quite sure about that. So it is concerning. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other updates or presentations? Anything from the beautiful island of Maui, John Miller?
Nothing from a legislator's perspective. We are meeting Friday tomorrow with Hank Rogers is hosting an event with we're bringing KAUC and the Hawaii Utility and several different stakeholders, renewable energy groups, to basically look at ways to kind of really help accelerate the adoption of renewable energy and kind of push the gas pedal a little bit further. So hopefully, as that summit goes on this Friday, we'll be able to report back some progress and some exciting projects we can kind of move forward. So
great, thanks. Okay, anything else? Oh, yes, on the 13th of April, is it sure? I think the Kauai Climate Climate Action Coalition and our coalition are probably going to combine because they have a renowned speaker. Her name is Melody Aduha, I think. And so we'll probably combine our two coalitions and have a single meeting. And Melody is going to be speaking on legislation, I believe. Is that right, Melody?
Yes, that's correct. And part of it is going to be a discussion on what Ann Wright had raised regarding the Homeland Defense radar at the Pacific Missile Range. So tune in.
We're probably going to combine our two meetings, so that'll be
Hey, well,
great.
that's good. That's good. Now, I did also ask you whether we should have a forum with Christine Kubat and Henry Curtis on this SB 2662. So, yeah, maybe we'll do that the week before, the Kauai presentation.
Yeah, we'll have to look at our schedule, but okay.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, I was just looking at the vote on that. It was 24-1. The only one that voted against it was Senator Ocasio.
Oh, boy.
24-1. Wow.
Oh.
I'd like to read her comments on the floor. Do you know how we can get a hold of that?
You're gonna do that now? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, get a hold of it, because when
Oh.
yeah, I watched the floor
You weren't gonna read
session, and what they do, they say, they say, President, I'd like to add some comments to the journal. And so the general public will never hear what the arguments are. So then that becomes a question, how do we get a hold of our arguments? Because I'm sure it's going to be very good information when we, put our, it's a strange thing because we would be support with amendments, right? To try to bring it back to its original form and take out that gaseous state. Okay. All right.
I think we've covered everything.
Did John, you had said there's some things that you wanted to talk about at the meeting tonight?
No, John Miller,
No,
Dr. John Kawamoto
Kawamoto.
did. He deferred to, oh, wait a minute. Yes, John, you did have something you wanted to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up this idea of a questionnaire that interested environmental organizations could put together and send to the gubernatorial candidates to get their idea of how they feel about environmental issues in general and, some issues in particular. And of course, this would happen after the session. And then the environmental organizations could do what they want with the results. Anyway, it's just an idea, to get organizations to collaborate on something.
Well, that's already going on right now with the several groups, but we're focused on progressive issues in general. If you want to join in with that, with John, we just blanked out. You know what I'm talking about, Melody? Yeah. Anyway, and Alan. But anyway, that's happening now, and John Pickle, and so we can get you in that, or you can call a meeting and invite environmental groups to do the same thing, to get together, just to put together. These are the questions we want to ask about environment. It's a great, wonderful idea.
Well, Jeff has a pretty good extensive questionnaire that he and his group are finalizing. Jeff, did you want to talk about it?
Yeah, we formed a political action committee here on the Big Island to uplift, actually stands for Help Uplift Candidates of Integrity here on the Big Island. And we're just getting ready to do our interviews. I think the first ones are going to be on the 24th. And it's pretty much focusing at this point only on Big Island candidates. But the questionnaire is very extensive. So I had asked Melody to take a look at it because she works with a lot of the different caucuses. What is it, 4 different caucuses you're with now? So yeah, I wanted to get feedback on the questions we were planning to ask. And if there's someone else, maybe David, if you'd like to take a look at them, I'd be happy to forward them to you, as long as you keep that to yourself. We don't want the candidates or any of the incumbents, especially, to see the questions beforehand, but I'd be happy to send those to you. It's several pages long.
Maybe you could also send to John. So
Yeah.
you can get a look at it.
Yeah, and I think that you might want to use some of the same questions. I don't know if you're going to be doing supported progressive candidates later this year through Our Revolution, but some of these questions might be well taken for that organization.
Yes. Okay.
Very good.
Okay.
I think we're starting.
Melody, I had one more thing that came up. I don't know if anybody on this call knows Mike Uhl. He's the executive director for the Energy Justice Network. And he reached out to us. He's going to be here on the Big Island March 22nd through March 26th, and was interested in connecting with anyone working on biomass or waste issues. He's very concerned about the threats that we're facing from large-scale industrial burning of trash and trees. And he's claiming that he spent a long time helping communities stop projects like this, and developed the zero waste hierarchy that is the basis for Zero Waste International Alliance's global standards. I'm not that familiar with it, but I wanted to see if anybody knew him, or if this was something we might be interested in pursuing.
I would say so.
Okay.
If we can get
I'll
some
go ahead.
back information.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and forward his contact information to you. We'll
Okay.
See what comes of it.
Okay. All righty. Well, I think that we should close this out. It's been a most informative meeting. So thank you very much, everyone. I don't know, learning about all that militarism and all the adverse effects to our environment and around the world is just, it's sad. So hopefully we can do something and move forward in the right direction. All right, Dave, closing remarks?
Melody, I just really appreciate you so much. You're just such a poised presenter. And I wish I was as poised as you are. Thank you all. I just really appreciate you all, and we're all working together for the same thing. So you know, see you in the on the front lines, and take care of yourselves. Aloha for the evening.
Congratulations on Red Hill, everyone.
Yes, we did it. It is us. No matter what they say, it was us.
Definitely.
Forget about the military and Kaikaheli behind the scenes. It was us, doggone it.
We did it.
Exactly. All right. Mahalo.
Good night.
Night, everyone.